The second time I woke up on the morning of the Meridian Code Crown Finals, my laptop was already open on my desk, the blue glow of the screen spilling over my hands like cold water, and my best friend was standing behind me with a smile that had once ruined my life. In my first life, that smile had looked nervous, almost sweet, the kind of smile Serena Vale used when she wanted people to believe she was harmless. She had leaned over my shoulder, pointed at the project folder named Aster, and whispered, "Lena, can I just look at one section?"
I'm panicking.
You know I would never copy. I had believed her because I was 19, exhausted, too desperate to keep the peace, and stupid enough to think love was proven by giving people access to the things you had built alone. 6 hours later, Serena submitted my entire source package under her name, walked on stage in a white blazer while cameras flashed, accepted the grand prize, the internship, the investor meetings, the fellowship, and the title of youngest female finalist in the contest's history. By midnight, I was the one being investigated for retaliatory tampering because a corrupted file had appeared in the judge server under my account. By the end of the month, I had been expelled from the university lab, blacklisted from 2 graduate programs, and told by my own mother that I should apologize for embarrassing the family. By the end of the year, Serena was giving speeches about women in technology, while my emails came back unopened. And by the end of that life, standing in the rain outside a courthouse with the appeal papers soaked through in my hands, I finally understood that some people do not steal because they need what you have. They steal because watching you lose it makes them feel chosen. Then a bus horn split the street. A flash of headlights swallowed everything. And now I was here again, alive. 19, holding a half-empty coffee mug beside a laptop Serena thought she would own before sunrise. "Lena?" Serena said, soft as lace, and I kept my eyes on the screen because the first rule of being reborn is not to stare too long at the knife while it is still pretending to be a hand. My dorm room looked exactly as it had before the finals in my first life. Laundry folded badly on the chair, my contest hoodie hanging from the wardrobe door, 3 empty instant noodle cups in the bin, the small silver charm my father had given me before he died resting beside the keyboard. The only thing different was me. In the first life, I had turned around quickly, guilty for making Serena wait, already apologizing for being stressed. This time, I watched her reflection in the dark strip of the monitor. She wore the same cream cardigan, the same careful, anxious expression, the same pearl clips holding back hair she always claimed looked messy even when she had spent an hour arranging it. She glanced at my project folder as if she had not already memorized its location. She glanced at my external drive as if she had not come here for it. "I brought breakfast," she said, lifting a paper bag from the campus bakery. "You forgot to eat again, didn't you?" In my first life, I had laughed and thanked her, touched by the gesture, not knowing she had slipped a mild sedative into the tea, so I would sleep through the final submission window. This time, I smiled back through the monitor reflection and said, "You always take care of me." The words tasted like metal, but Serena's shoulders relaxed because thieves love being called kind before the theft. She came closer, put the bag on my desk, and set a cup of tea beside my mouse. Steam rose from it in a thin white thread. I did not touch it. The Meridian Code Crown was not just a student contest. It was the kind of competition universities bragged about in glossy brochures and sponsors used to find young developers before anyone else could afford them. The finals took place every spring in the glass auditorium at Haviland Institute, where the stage lights made everyone look sharper, wealthier, more inevitable than they were. This year's theme was disaster logistics. Build a system that could reroute supply shipments in real time after road closures, shortages, hospital alerts, and weather disruptions. My solution, Aster, was ugly in the way most real things are ugly before they become famous. Its interface was plain. Its charts were not pretty. But underneath, it could adjust thousands of routes in seconds without collapsing when new constraints arrived. I had built it after my father died waiting for a transferred blood unit during a flood that trapped half the city's hospitals behind washed-out roads. I did not talk about that part often because grief, once turned into a project proposal, becomes something strangers feel entitled to compliment. Serena knew, though. Serena had sat on my bed and held my hand while I told her why I cared. Serena had cried with me. Then Serena had stolen the system and, in her acceptance speech, said she built it because technology should serve the vulnerable. The applause had lasted 42 seconds. I counted in the recording later, back when I still tortured myself by watching it. 42 seconds for my father's memory in someone else's mouth. In the first life, the theft had worked because Serena understood people better than I understood machines. I thought evidence was truth. She knew truth was only useful when people were ready to believe it. She spent months before the finals becoming my shadow in public, sitting beside me in workshops, bringing me coffee in the lab, asking thoughtful questions near professors, telling everyone we were basically building parallel solutions, even though she had not written anything beyond a demo dashboard that froze when more than 50 data points loaded. She did not need to be better than me. She only needed to make our work look similar enough that, when she submitted mine, people could shrug and say collaboration between friends gets messy. Then she planted the second half of the trap. A week before finals, she begged me to test her login because her laptop was acting strange. In my first life, I used my device to access the practice server under her account just once for 5 minutes. Later, when the corrupted file appeared under my name, the committee saw cross-account access, overlapping IP addresses, and Serena's tearful statement that I had always been competitive in a scary way. A story formed around me before I could speak. I was the bitter friend, the jealous girl, the unstable coder who could not accept losing. I learned then that logs do not save you if someone else writes the narrative first. So in this life, I did not intend to stop Serena from stealing my code. I intended to let her carry it into the brightest room in the university and hold it up high enough for every camera to see the fingerprints she thought she had wiped away. For 6 weeks after waking up Reborn, I had prepared quietly. I rebuilt Aster from a private repository Serena had never seen, stored signed timestamps with Professor Imani Rook, the only faculty mentor who had doubted my guilt in the first life, and registered a sealed technical disclosure with the contest integrity office under a rule most finalists ignored because they were too busy polishing pitch decks. I submitted daily progress hashes, not the code itself, just cryptographic fingerprints proving what existed when. I asked the lab administrator, Mr. Pell, to preserve door card logs because my external drive went missing twice, and I wanted to be careful. I used the official contest laptop for all final builds because the rules recorded local compilation times, account tokens, and machine IDs. I did not install traps, spyware, or anything dramatic. I did not need to. Competitions already love surveillance when sponsors are nervous. I simply stopped pretending the system was built to protect friendships. It was built to protect institutions from embarrassment, and I planned to turn that appetite toward the girl who had once fed me to it. "Are you nearly done?" Serena asked, leaning against my desk with the paper bag still unopened. Her eyes slid to the Aster folder again. "You look calmer than I expected." That was the first crack. In the old life, I had been shaking by this hour, hair falling out of its clip, words slurring from lack of sleep and whatever she had put in my tea. She had known exactly when to ask for access because panic makes generosity look noble. This time, I closed one window slowly and left another open on purpose, a decoy folder with the same architecture, the same file names, the same comments she had skimmed over my shoulder before, but one version behind the real build. It would pass the public demo tests. It would look complete enough to steal. It would also carry the most important thing a thief hates: provenance. Not a hidden bomb, not sabotage, just a trail that tied the copy to the moment it was taken, to the device it had been taken from, and to the version I had already disclosed as mine. "Almost," I said. "I'm just too tired to think straight." Serena's mouth softened. She had always loved my exhaustion. It made her feel taller. "You should rest," she said. "Even 20 minutes. I can wake you." I turned at last, met her eyes, and let my face become the girl she remembered. Trusting, overworked, grateful for crumbs. "Could you watch the upload timer for me?" I asked. "Just make sure I don't miss the deadline if I lie down." Her relief flickered so quickly someone else might have missed it. I did not. "Of course," she said. "Anything for you." I did not drink the tea. I carried it with me to the bathroom, poured it into the sink, rinsed the cup, and filled it with water so she would think the level had dropped when I came back. Then I curled on the bed, turned my face toward the wall, and slowed my breathing until Serena believed she was alone. The old me would have fallen asleep frightened. The new me lay awake with my phone under the blanket, recording the room legally under Haviland's student safety policy after a missing property report had already been filed. I heard Serena wait. That was the part that chilled me more than the theft itself. She did not lunge at the laptop. She did not act desperate. For nearly 4 minutes, she sat in my chair and hummed softly, as if giving my trust time to settle around her like dust. Then the chair wheels creaked. A zipper opened. My external drive clicked once against the desk. Her nails tapped quickly over the keyboard. She whispered, "Come on," not with fear, but with impatience, the way someone might talk to a vending machine refusing to release a snack they had already paid for. The folder copied in under 30 seconds. She checked my breathing, then copied the project notes too. Finally, she opened my browser history, took photos of the contest upload page, and smiled at my sleeping back. I knew she smiled because I heard it in her voice when she murmured, "You should have been less obvious, Lena." That almost made me laugh. In my first life, Serena had called me obvious after destroying me, but I had misunderstood the insult for years. I thought she meant my ambition was obvious, my envy, my desperation to prove myself. Now, lying still while she packed my work into her bag, I understood. To Serena, goodness was obvious. Trust was obvious. Grief was obvious. People like me showed where the soft parts were, because we believed the people we loved would protect them. She had not beaten me because she was clever. She had beaten me because I had been readable. When she left, she did not slam the door. She closed it with the delicacy of a nurse leaving a patient to sleep. I waited until her footsteps faded down the hall, then sat up and looked at the laptop. The decoy folder was gone. The real Aster build, stored elsewhere, pulsed on the screen behind a locked session she had never noticed. A message from Professor Rook sat in my secure inbox. Final disclosure received. Integrity Office acknowledged. Do not confront. Let process run. I read that last sentence 3 times because it felt like a prayer written by a woman who had seen too many talented girls beg institutions to care. Do not confront. Let process run. I closed my laptop, dressed for finals in the navy suit I had been too nervous to wear in the first life, and pinned my father's silver charm inside the pocket where no camera could see it. By 9 o'clock, the Haviland auditorium was full of finalists, sponsors, faculty, reporters from tech magazines, parents pretending not to look competitive, and students who had come because there would be free food after the awards. The stage had 3 massive screens, each showing the Meridian Code crown logo rotating above the words "Build for Crisis, Build for Life." Serena stood near the registration desk surrounded by people, laughing with both hands wrapped around a coffee she had not needed to drug because her confidence made her alert enough. She looked radiant. Of course she did. Some people bloom after betrayal the way flowers bloom after rain. When she saw me, her face changed by 1 shade. Not fear. Calculation. "Lena," she called, loud enough for our classmates to hear. "You made it. I was worried you'd oversleep." There it was, the first public thread of her narrative. I was unreliable. She was attentive. If anything went wrong, everyone had heard the prelude. I smiled and walked toward her with my badge clipped perfectly straight. "You saved me," I said, matching her volume. "I don't know what I'd do without you." A few people smiled at our friendship. Serena's eyes shone. She thought I was still inside the cage she had built. She did not know I had learned how to decorate the cage and invite witnesses inside. Registration was where her first mistake became official. Every finalist had to scan their badge, verify their submission name, and sign an originality statement before receiving a stage order. In my first life, I had been too drowsy to notice Serena's hands trembling when she signed. This time, I stood 3 places behind her and watched her write Serena Vale in a clean looping signature beneath the statement that said, "I confirm that this submission is my original work and that no unauthorized code, libraries, models, or project files have been used." She signed with my code on a drive in her bag, and my father's story waiting in her speech. There is a special kind of arrogance in people who commit fraud on paper. They believe ink is theater, that rules are for people without talent, that consequences only arrive when someone weaker complains. After she signed, the registration officer scanned her final upload token. The screen blinked green. Submission locked. She exhaled, tiny and satisfied, then stepped aside. My turn came. I scanned my badge. The officer frowned at his monitor, then looked up at me. Miss Ark, your disclosure packet is marked restricted. You're cleared for secondary verification after presentation. His voice was neutral, but Serena's head turned. Good. I wanted her to hear just enough to worry and not enough to run. Of course, I said. Professor Rook told me. The officer printed my stage order without another word. Serena's smile had thinned by the time I joined her. What was that about? She asked as we walked toward the finalists' holding area. Around us, teams compared demo times, adjusted microphones, and rehearsed lines about scalability and impact. The room smelled of coffee, hairspray, and overheated chargers. What? I asked. Restricted disclosure, Serena said, trying to make the words sound casual. Sounds intense. I shrugged. I filed some authorship documents. My dad always told me to keep records. That was not entirely true. My father had told me to label cables, pay bills early, and never trust anyone who mocked waiters, but he had died before he could teach me how to survive intellectual theft. Serena tilted her head. Authorship documents? Why? I looked at her, let a small embarrassed laugh escape, and said, I got paranoid after my external drive went missing. You know me. I panic. The relief came back too fast. She thought paranoia would make me look unstable if accusations flew. You do overthink, she said gently, touching my arm. But it's sweet. Sweet. The word slid under my skin. In my first life, she had called me sweet to my face and obsessive to the committee. This time, I let her touch my sleeve and imagine the contest database stamping her locked submission with a time, a device signature, and a version history that would soon become a noose. The finalists presented in clusters. A team from Seoul showed a drone routing tool that looked beautiful but failed when the simulation doubled the wind speed. A German student built a hospital bed allocator that impressed every sponsor in the front row. A pair of twins from Melbourne made an emergency translation chatbot and nearly won the audience before their microphone cut out. The old me would have watched all of it with anxious admiration, measuring myself against everyone, wondering whether Aster was good enough. This time, I watched Serena watch me. Every few minutes, her gaze drifted to my laptop case. She expected me to open it, to discover the decoy missing, to panic, to accuse her, to look unstable in public. When I remained calm, she became restless. She checked her phone. She whispered to her mentor, Dr. Hale, a man whose support she had won by flattering his outdated lectures and laughing at jokes no one else found funny. Dr. Hale glanced at me once, lips tight with the contempt of professors who prefer charming thieves to difficult geniuses. I remembered him from the hearing in my first life. He had said, Miss Ark has always been intense. That single word had done more damage than any accusation because intense women are always half convicted before evidence appears. Serena had learned from men like him. Smile first. Cry second. Let them call the other girl intense. When Serena's name appeared on the main screen, the applause was warmer than she deserved. She walked on stage in that white blazer, the same one from the first life, the one tailored to make her look like the kind of founder investors imagine before they have heard her speak. My chest tightened despite everything. Trauma is not logical. You can know the trap is yours and still feel the old blade enter. She began exactly as before. When crisis comes, systems do not fail all at once. They fail at the seams, where hospitals wait, where families call, where supplies sit in warehouses while roads vanish underwater. My sentence, my rhythm, my father's flood, scrubbed clean of his name. She turned toward the screen and the demo loaded. Aster's map interface, my route optimizer, my emergency priority weighting, my imperfect little icons that I had designed at 3 in the morning because I could not sleep after dreaming of ambulances stuck behind barricades. The audience leaned forward. A sponsor whispered to another. The live simulation began. Serena clicked through it with polished ease because she had rehearsed from my notes. The system adapted to road closures. It shifted oxygen shipments to a clinic. It delayed non-urgent deliveries. It produced a heat map of unmet need. Applause began before she finished. My fingers closed around the silver charm inside my pocket until its edges dug into my palm. The old world wanted to repeat itself. It always does, unless you force it to choke on the details. Then the first pattern interruption arrived. Serena clicked to the final results slide, but instead of her chart, the screen froze on a blue verification notice. The auditorium murmured. Serena laughed lightly, the perfect little finalist laugh that says technology misbehaves for everyone. Looks like the demo server needs a moment, she said. A technician near the side stage lifted one hand to his headset. On the screen, the notice changed. Submission under integrity review. Please remain on stage. The laughter died so quickly I could hear someone in the front row set down a coffee cup. Serena's smile stayed in place for half a second too long, then flickered. Is this part of the simulation? Asked one of the judges, a venture partner with silver hair and a voice trained to make disappointment sound expensive. Serena looked toward the technician. I'm not sure. It wasn't in rehearsal. Dr. Hale stood in the faculty section. There must be a server issue, he called, too loud, already defending her before anyone accused. That helped me more than he knew. Innocent mentors ask questions. Guilty mentors explain too early. The contest director, Miriam Voss, walked out from the wings holding a tablet, her expression calm enough to terrify every finalist in the room. She did not look at Serena first. She looked at the audience. We will pause for a procedural verification, she said. Miss Vale, please remain where you are. In my first life, I had been summoned into a small office after the awards, where 3 people sat behind a table and treated my shaking like evidence. Serena had cried outside with friends around her. The investigation had happened in private, which meant she controlled the public story before facts emerged. This time, I had chosen the rule that required immediate stage suspension if a finalist's locked submission matched a restricted disclosure filed by another competitor before the deadline. The rule existed because 3 years earlier, a corporate team had tried to buy a student's project and submit a derivative product through a shell entrant. Sponsors hated scandals that looked like exploitation, so Meridian created a dramatic public safeguard to prove integrity. They probably never imagined a 19-year-old girl would read every page of the rulebook after dying once with no one on her side. Miriam Voss spoke quietly into her headset. 2 officials approached the side of the stage. Serena's face had gone pale under the lights, but she recovered enough to smile at the judges. I'm sure it's a misunderstanding, she said. My project has been in development for months. I almost admired the speed of her lie. Almost. Then the screen behind her split into 2 panels. Her submitted file tree on the left, my restricted disclosure fingerprint list on the right. Identical structures, highlighted line by line. The audience inhaled as one body. Miriam did not accuse her yet. That was the brilliance of institutional cruelty when it finally points in the right direction. It proceeds politely while the target bleeds. Miss Vale, she said, for the record, did you personally author the submitted project currently labeled Astergrid? Serena blinked. She had renamed it. In my decoy folder, I had left an old internal title, Astergrid, in 3 configuration files. In my real submission, I had cleaned it. She had not known the difference. Yes, Serena said, voice steady enough that anyone who did not know her might believe it. I developed it independently. Did anyone else contribute code, design notes, optimization methods, or project files? Miriam asked. Dr. Hale moved again. Director Voss, this is inappropriate during a live. Dr. Hale, Miriam said without looking at him. You are not the candidate. The room went still. Serena swallowed. No, she said. No one else contributed. There it was. The lie in its purest form. Not confusion. Not collaboration. not misunderstanding. No one else contributed. My hands stopped shaking because grief loves clarity. When a person gives you the exact sentence that will destroy them, the world becomes strangely quiet. Miriam tapped her tablet. The screen changed again and my name appeared. Lena Ark, Restricted Disclosure ID, MC4729A, Submission Fingerprints Received, 6 weeks prior, 5 weeks prior, 4 weeks prior, 2 weeks prior, Final Build Certification Pending. Below it, a timeline unfurled, repository snapshots, lab machine logs, mentor verification, sealed project abstract. The audience was no longer whispering. They were reading. Serena stared at my name as if letters could betray her. I did not move from my seat. I wanted every camera to catch that I was not lunging, not crying, not begging. I wanted them to compare my stillness to the panic beginning to show at the corners of her mouth. These records establish prior development by another finalist, Miriam said. However, prior development alone does not prove unauthorized acquisition. Miss Vale, can you provide your development history for comparison? Serena's eyes darted to Dr. Hale. He had gone gray. The contest required all finalists to sync their repositories to the official archive each week, but Serena's archive contained empty commits, cosmetic interface changes, and placeholder functions until the morning she visited my room. In the first life, no one cared because she had already won, and I looked like the attacker. This time the timeline cared. Machines do not love you, but they do not flatter thieves either. They remember what they are asked to remember. I have local files, Serena said, too quickly. My laptop has earlier drafts. I didn't sync everything, because the server was unstable. A reasonable lie, if the director had not already expected it. Miriam nodded to an official, who connected Serena's laptop to the evidence display through a forensic review station. The process was not theatrical enough for a movie. No green code cascaded down the screen, no hacker music swelled, no genius typed furiously. Mostly, people waited while progress bars moved. That made it worse. Every second stretched Serena thinner. Sweat gathered near her hairline.
A camera operator shifted closer.
Her mentor whispered something to a dean, but the dean stepped away from him as if scandal could spread by touch. Finally, the official spoke into Miriam's earpiece, and Miriam's eyes lowered to the tablet. Local metadata shows the substantive project files entered Miss Vale's device at 7:14 this morning, she said. That is less than 2 hours before submission lock. Serena's mouth opened. No, that's when I transfer my backup. From what source? Miriam asked. Serena looked toward me for the first time, not with pleading, not yet, but with hatred so naked I felt the old life loosen its grip on my throat. She had expected me to be asleep, confused, cornered. She had not expected me to sit among the audience like a witness at her execution. I stood only when Miriam called my name, not before. Timing mattered. If I rose too early, I became the accuser. If I waited, I became the answer to a question the room had already started asking. Miss Ark, Miriam said, did you author the restricted project disclosed under ID MC 4729A? Yes, I said. My voice carried better than I expected. Did you author, transfer, sell, license, share, or knowingly provide those files to Miss Vale for submission? Serena's eyes widened. This was the door she needed me to open. If I admitted letting her access the laptop, she would squeeze through and call it collaboration. If I denied everything, she would show whatever photo she had taken and call me a liar. I had prepared for the shape of the door. I did not authorize her to submit my work, I said. And I did not collaborate with her on this project. Miriam watched me carefully. Did she have physical access to your device? I let the room feel the answer before I gave it.
Yes.
After I filed a missing property concern, and after my mentor advised me to preserve records, Miss Vale entered my room this morning while I was resting. My device recorded local activity during that time, and the contest office received my final authorship notice before her submission was locked. A ripple moved through the auditorium. Not outrage yet. Recognition. People were rearranging the story in real time, moving me out of the villain's chair and pushing Serena toward it. Serena finally broke character. You set me up, she said. Not loudly, but the stage microphones loved her too much to let it stay private. The words boomed through the auditorium. Several heads turned. Miriam's face sharpened. "Miss Vale, please clarify." Serena realized what she had said and tried to turn it. "I mean, she's been acting strange for weeks. She knew I was working on a similar system. She filed secret documents to trap me because she couldn't stand competition." Dr. Hale seized the thread. "There has been tension between these students for months," he said, stepping into the aisle like a lawyer in a cheap drama. "Miss Ark is brilliant but possessive. It is entirely possible she designed this situation to create ambiguity after realizing Miss Vale's implementation was stronger." There he was, the old world speaking through an old man's mouth. Brilliant but possessive, talented but unstable, intense but untrustworthy. In my first life, that language had buried me. This time, I looked at Miriam and said, "May I provide the private build comparison?" Professor Rook stood from the back row before anyone could answer. She was tall, silver-haired, and severe, the sort of woman students feared until they needed someone who would not be charmed by tears. "I can verify it," she said. "I have supervised Miss Ark's sealed builds for 6 weeks." Dr. Hale turned on her. "Imani, this is absurd." Professor Rook did not blink.
No, Harold.
Absurd was you signing Serena's weekly progress forms when her repository contained no working optimizer. That was the second rupture. Faculty scandals smell different from student scandals. When a student cheats, people murmur. When a professor may have enabled it, administrators begin calculating liability. The dean of engineering stood. The sponsor representatives leaned together. Serena looked at Dr. Hale with panic now because the shield she had counted on had become another piece of evidence. Miriam asked Professor Rook to approach the verification table. Professor Rook inserted a sealed drive she had kept in the faculty safe. The screen displayed my real Aster build, not the decoy Serena had stolen. It looked cleaner, faster, more stable. The interface had accessibility features Serena's version lacked. The disaster simulation ran with additional hospital priority rules that were missing from her upload because I had added them after creating the decoy branch. Most importantly, the code comparison showed Serena's version carried obsolete internal comments from 3 weeks prior, including a note I had written to myself at 2:11 a.m. Ask Dad what he would have done if Rhodes failed twice. I had never removed it from the decoy. The room did not know what that sentence meant, but I did. Serena had submitted my grief with the dust still on it. The judge with silver hair looked from the screen to Serena and said, "Miss Vale, can you explain why your allegedly independent submission contains Miss Ark's private development note?" Serena's lips moved. No sound came out. For one dangerous second, pity stirred in me. Not forgiveness.
Pity.
Serena looked very young under the lights with all her cleverness stripped away. Her white blazer, so triumphant in my memory, suddenly seemed too bright, too stiff, like a costume rented for a role she had never earned. I remembered the first week of university when she cried in the bathroom because older boys in the lab ignored her questions. I remembered helping her debug a simple script and watching her face light up when the output finally worked. I remembered thinking we were the same kind of hungry, two girls trying to carve a place in rooms that preferred us decorative. But then memory corrected itself. I remembered her acceptance speech. I remembered my mother refusing to answer my calls. I remembered Serena posting a photo with the caption, "Some people will try to dim your light when they cannot find their own." I remembered standing outside that courthouse in the rain with nothing left but the truth, and even the truth had looked tired.
Pity died.
Consequences took its chair. Serena chose tears next because tears had saved her before. They came fast and beautifully, sliding down her cheeks without disturbing her makeup. "I made a mistake," she said, voice breaking. "I was scared. Everyone expected so much from me. Lena was always the genius, and I just wanted one chance to prove I belonged. I didn't think it would go this far." That was not confession. That was editing. She wanted the room to replace theft with insecurity, fraud with pressure, malice with a sad girl reaching too high. In another setting, it might have worked, but Miriam Voss had not built a career in contest integrity by mistaking tears for evidence. Miss Vale, she said, did you knowingly submit Miss Ark's project as your own? Serena sobbed harder. I was going to tell her after. Did you knowingly submit Miss Ark's project as your own? Miriam repeated. The room held its breath. Serena looked at me. For the first time that day, she wanted something from me honestly. Not code. Not access.
Mercy.
She wanted me to interrupt, to say we could handle it privately, to give her a way to survive because the old Lena had always softened first. I stared back and said nothing. Silence is not cruelty when someone else filled the room with lies. Yes, Serena whispered. The microphones caught it. The screen did not need to show another file. The story had ended, but institutions love procedure almost as much as thieves love loopholes. So Miriam continued. For the record, did Dr. Harold Hale assist you in preparing, concealing, or misrepresenting your project progress? Dr. Hale barked. Absolutely not. Serena flinched. That flinch was answer enough to make half the front row shift in their seats. Miriam nodded to the integrity officer. Another timeline appeared, this one showing faculty progress approvals. Dr. Hale had certified Serena's functional route optimizer for weeks earlier, 2 weeks earlier, and 3 days earlier. Each certification attached to repository states that did not contain such a system. These discrepancies will be referred to the University Ethics Office, Miriam said. Dr. Hale's face darkened. You have no authority over faculty discipline. Correct, Miriam said. But the contest has authority over eligibility, prize awards, sponsor reporting, and referrals under the integrity agreement you signed. Professor Rook's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Dr. Hale sat down slowly. Serena looked as if the stage had tilted beneath her. She had expected me to be the only person she needed to defeat. She had forgotten that thieves create accomplices, and accomplices panic when lights turn on. Then came the ruling. Miriam stood center stage, the Code Crown logo glowing behind her like a verdict seal. Effective immediately, Serena Vale's submission is disqualified for deliberate authorship fraud, unauthorized acquisition of another finalist's project files, false originality certification, and misrepresentation during a live integrity inquiry. Under Section 12 of the Finalist Agreement, Miss Vale is stripped of finalist standing, declared ineligible for any Meridian-sponsored award, internship, fellowship, or partner placement, and barred for life from all Meridian Code Crown competitions and affiliated innovation programs. The words landed one by one. Each cleaner than revenge should be stripped, ineligible, barred for life. The audience did not clap. Real disgrace rarely sounds like applause. It sounds like chairs creaking, phones buzzing, people realizing they are witnessing something they will retell carefully later. Serena swayed. An official stepped closer, not touching her, giving her the dignity of not being dragged. That was more dignity than she had given me in the first life. Dr. Hale stared at the floor. The judges looked grim. The sponsor representatives looked furious, not because they loved justice, but because they had nearly funded a fraud. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt something heavier and quieter. A door in my chest opened, and behind it was not joy, but air. Miriam turned to me. Miss Ark, the committee will recess for 20 minutes. Your submission remains eligible pending secondary verification. Are you prepared to present your independent final build? Every eye found me. The old Lena would have shaken. The old Lena had been trained by humiliation to fear attention, because attention had once arrived only as accusation. I stood anyway. Yes, I said. My voice did not crack. I am. As officials guided Serena off stage, she passed the front row where I waited near the aisle. For a heartbeat, we were close enough that I could smell her perfume under the sweat. You ruined me, she whispered. In the first life, I had imagined 1,000 replies. You ruined me first. You deserved it. I hope it hurts. But the strangest part of surviving your own destruction is learning that the perfect comeback is sometimes too small for the size of what happened. I looked at her and said, no. I stop helping. Her face twisted, maybe in rage, maybe in understanding, but the official moved her along before either of us could find out. The recess became a storm. Students flooded the lobby. Reporters called editors. Sponsors demanded private briefings. The university communications team appeared from nowhere with the pale, tight expressions of people who had built careers on phrases like isolated incident and robust review process. My phone vibrated until I turned it off. Messages from classmates arrived in fragments on the lock screen. Did you know? Are you okay? I always thought Serena was sketchy. That last one nearly made me laugh because hindsight is the cheapest courage in the world. Professor Rook found me near a window overlooking the courtyard. Rain dotted the glass, turning the campus into a blurred painting of brick, trees, and umbrellas. You handled that well, she said. Coming from her, that was almost a standing ovation. I wanted to scream, I admitted. Good, she said. Screaming is a sign your nervous system has not mistaken injustice for normal. I looked at her then, really looked, remembering how in my first life she had written one letter for my appeal, when everyone else stayed silent. It had not saved me, but it had kept one small corner of the world honest. Thank you for believing me, I said. Professor Rook's expression softened. I believed the evidence. Then I believed you. In that order, it matters. She was right. Blind belief can be another form of carelessness. What saved me this time was not someone loving me loudly. It was someone preserving truth carefully enough that love did not have to carry the whole weight. My presentation happened 27 minutes later, after the stage crew removed Serena's name from the finalist rotation and the director explained that the competition would proceed. Some people probably thought continuing was cold. I thought it was perfect. My work deserved a room that had finished mistaking theft for brilliance. When I walked on stage, the lights hit my face and for a second I saw both lives at once. The first, where I sat at home refreshing news articles about Serena's victory until my eyes burned. The second, where I stood before the judges with my father's charm against my heart. I did not begin with the same sentence Serena had stolen. I had written a new opening because rebirth should not mean repeating even the beautiful parts exactly. A system fails first where people stop being seen, I said. My project is designed for the moments when a city becomes too overwhelmed to notice who is still waiting. The room quieted. I told them about flood routes, hospital supply chains, triage ethics, and why optimization without human priority becomes a prettier way to abandon people. I did not mention my father by name, not at first. I let the system speak. The demo ran on the official server, not the decoy. It handled a bridge collapse, a medication shortage, a generator failure, and a sudden evacuation order, without freezing.
The heat map changed.
The route list updated. The judges leaned forward again, but this time they were watching me. Halfway through, a sponsor asked the question I had once dreamed of hearing and dreaded answering. Why build this alone? A tool of this scope usually requires a team. In the first life, Serena had answered with a polished line about leadership and collaboration. I took a breath. I did not build it alone because I wanted credit, I said. I built it alone because the first version began as grief, and I did not know how to share that without making it smaller. Later, when the project became serious, I should have built a team under clear agreements. That is one of the lessons this process has taught me. It was risky to admit imperfection during finals, but perfection had never protected me. Honesty, properly timed, is harder to twist. The judge nodded slowly. And the grief? She asked gently. I touched the charm in my pocket. My father died during a flood response delay. A supply transfer that should have taken 40 minutes took almost 4 hours. This project does not undo that. It just refuses to treat delays like numbers with no names attached. The auditorium stayed silent for one long second. Then someone in the back clapped once, awkwardly, as if the body reacted before etiquette could stop it. The applause spread, not explosive like Serena's old victory, but deep, unsettled, human. I did not win first prize. That is important. Stories like this often want justice to arrive wearing a crown, but real justice is sometimes more disciplined than fantasy. The German hospital bed allocator won overall, and it deserved to. My project received the Crisis Systems Award, a sponsor grant, and an invitation to develop Aster with a public interest technology lab under Professor Rook's supervision. In my first life, I would have seen anything short of first place as proof that the universe still owed me. In this life, when Miriam handed me the certificate, I felt no lack. My name was printed correctly. My work was described accurately. My father's project was not in Serena's mouth. That was victory enough to make my knees weak. After the photos, a journalist asked if I had a statement about Serena Vale. Cameras lifted. I recognized the hunger in their eyes. They wanted a quote sharp enough to become a headline, a revenge line, a girl boss moment, a clean little blade they could sell. I thought of Serena being led off stage, of Dr. Hale's collapse, of my mother's future phone call once the news reached her. Then I said, this was never about one person taking one file. It was about whether young people, especially young women, are taught that visibility matters more than integrity. I hope the next girl who builds something keeps records, asks for protection early, and understands that trust should never require giving up proof. The journalist looked disappointed.
Good.
I had not survived 2 lives to become a caption. My mother called that evening. I knew she would. In the first life, she had called after Serena's win to ask why I could not be more gracious. Later, after accusations against me spread, she called to cry about how the scandal affected Serena's future. She was not evil in the grand theatrical way Serena was. She was worse in a quieter way. She loved whoever made the family look successful. This time, I answered from the empty lab while rain tapped against the windows and Astor's final logs exported to Professor Rook's archive. Lena, my mother said, breathless. What happened? Serena's mother is hysterical. The university says there was some misunderstanding, and people online are saying horrible things. I closed my eyes. There it was, the family translation machine already softening fraud into misunderstanding and consequences into cruelty. There was no misunderstanding, I said. Serena stole my code and submitted it as hers. The contest verified it publicly. My mother went quiet, then chose the path I expected. But did you have to let it happen on stage? You know how fragile Serena can be. In my first life, that sentence would have gutted me. This time, it merely confirmed the shape of the room I had outgrown. She was not too fragile to steal it, I said. She was not too fragile to sign the originality statement. She was not too fragile to lie when asked directly. Do not call me again to ask me to protect her from what she did. My mother started crying. I did not apologize. That silence was another kind of rebirth. The fallout moved faster than weather. By morning, Meridian had issued its official statement. Serena Vale was barred for life from all affiliated programs. Her internship offers vanished from LinkedIn before lunch. Haviland opened an academic misconduct case. Dr. Hale was placed on administrative leave pending review of false progress certifications. Students who had adored Serena began deleting photos, then posting vague reflections about accountability. Someone leaked a clip of her saying, "You set me up," and the internet did what it always does, turning a human collapse into 1,000 jokes, edits, arguments, and moral performances. I did not watch much of it. Public vindication is addictive if you let it replace healing. I had spent one life starving for anyone to say I was right. Now that thousands of strangers were saying it, I discovered their voices could not reach the deepest wound. The old damage had not been caused by strangers. It had been caused by people close enough to know exactly where to cut. So I went to the lab, met Professor Rook, and worked. We documented Astor properly. We created contributor guidelines. We wrote licensing terms. We built the team I should have built before betrayal taught me to confuse solitude with safety. 3 days later, Serena came to the lab. Security should not have let her through, but Haviland's buildings had always been better at protecting expensive equipment than wounded students. I was alone near the back bench, reviewing a route priority bug that only appeared when 2 hospitals requested the same scarce supply. The door opened, and she stepped inside wearing sweatpants, no makeup, and a face emptied of performance. For the first time since I had known her, Serena did not look like she had chosen a role before entering the room. "I need to talk to you," she said. I saved my file before answering. Old habits, new reasons. "No, you want to." She flinched. "Everyone hates me. That happens when they find out who you are." Her eyes filled, But the tears did not fall as prettily now. "You don't understand what it was like," she said. "You were always good at this. Professors noticed you. Sponsors noticed you. Even when you tried to hide, people knew you were special. I worked twice as hard to look half as brilliant, and it still wasn't enough." There it was again, the confession disguised as an accusation. I turned from the monitor. "So you stole from me." "I borrowed a version," she snapped, then caught herself. "I was going to improve it. I would have brought you in later." I laughed once, not because it was funny, but because my body rejected the lie like poison. "You submitted an originality statement." She looked away. I panicked. "No," I said. "You planned." Serena's face hardened, and for a moment the old girl returned, the one under the cardigan, under the tears, under the feminist speeches and trembling apologies. "You think you're innocent," she said. "You let me take it. You could have stopped me in the room. You could have confronted me privately. You wanted this." I stood slowly. "Yes," I said. The honesty surprised her. "I wanted the truth to happen where lies had no place to hide. I wanted you to choose, on record, in front of everyone, whether to tell the truth or keep stealing. You chose." Her mouth trembled. "You're cruel." "Maybe," I said, "but I am not a thief." The difference mattered to me, even if it did not matter to her. She looked around the lab, at the white boards, the grant paperwork, the team schedule beginning to form without her. "I lost everything," she whispered. "I thought of my first life. My scholarship gone, my lab access revoked, my father's project stolen, my reputation ground into dust, my mother's love conditional on my silence." "No," I said. "You lost what you tried to take." Serena stared at me as if she wanted to hate me enough to become powerful again, but hatred could not rebuild the platform she had burned. Finally, she left without another word. This time, the door closed like an ending. Months passed, and Aster became bigger than the contest. That sounds glamorous, but mostly it meant meetings, bugs, ethics reviews, procurement forms, and people in suits asking whether disaster victims could be sorted into categories more efficiently. Professor Rook taught me how to say no without sounding apologetic. A graduate student named Priya joined the project and rewrote half my interface with a kind of clean design that made me embarrassed of my original buttons. A systems engineer named Matteo built stress tests so brutal they made my early optimizer look like a toy. At first, sharing the project felt like letting strangers hold my ribs. Every pull request made my stomach tighten. Every suggestion sounded, for one irrational second, like the beginning of another theft. But healthy collaboration leaves receipts. Healthy collaborators do not need access to everything at once. They write their names beside their contributions. They question decisions in daylight. They do not call boundaries paranoia. Slowly, I learned the difference between guarding a wound and protecting work. Slowly, Aster stopped being the thing Serena stole and became the thing we were building. The lifetime ban stayed. Serena appealed twice. The first appeal argued emotional distress. The second argued procedural unfairness because the inquiry happened publicly. Meridian rejected both, citing the originality statement, the locked submission record, her live admission, and the local transfer metadata. Dr. Hale resigned before the ethics review concluded, releasing a statement about mentorship boundaries that used many words to avoid saying fraud. My mother sent me articles about forgiveness. I archived them without responding. Then, one evening near the end of summer, an envelope arrived at the lab addressed in Serena's handwriting. Inside was not an apology. Of course it was not. It was a printed copy of a job rejection she had received, with a sticky note attached. "Are you happy now?" I stared at the note for a long time. The old Lena would have written back. She would have explained that happiness had nothing to do with it, that Serena still did not understand, that consequences were not revenge just because they hurt. The new Lena placed the note in the evidence folder, not because I planned to use it, but because I had finally become the kind of person who preserved reality without begging it to be believed. The university hearing happened 12 days after the contest, and it was uglier than the public collapse because private rooms allow people to become cowardly again. The disciplinary panel met in a narrow conference room on the fourth floor of the administration building, where the windows did not open and the table was polished so brightly everyone looked doubled in the wood. Serena sat across from me with an advocate from Student Services, her mother on one side, and a stack of printed character statements on the other. I had Professor Rook, my documentation binder, and the strange calm that comes after you have already watched the worst version of a person perform under lights. Serena's mother cried before anyone asked a question. She told the panel Serena had always been under pressure, that talented girls sometimes made desperate choices, that a lifetime ban from Meridian was already punishment enough. Then she looked at me with red-rimmed eyes and said, "Lena, you know she loves you like a sister." In my first life, that sentence would have worked because I had wanted a sister more than I wanted justice. I had wanted family to mean someone would choose me without needing proof. This time, I opened the binder and placed 3 documents on the table: Serena's signed originality statement, the file transfer timeline, and a screenshot of her post from the old timeline that I had written from memory into my notes, because I refused to forget the shape of her cruelty. I did not show the third one as evidence. I kept it for myself, a reminder that love without accountability becomes camouflage. "This hearing is not about whether Serena was under pressure," I said. "Everyone here was under pressure. This is about whether pressure gives her permission to take my work, lie about it, and let me become collateral damage." The panel chair, a woman from the law faculty, nodded once. Serena looked at the table. Her mother stopped crying long enough to glare at me. I learned then that some families do not want peace. They want the victim to absorb the cost quietly, so everyone else can keep calling the house normal. The hearing revealed details I had not known even in my first life. Serena had not acted alone as spontaneously as she claimed. 2 weeks before the finals, she had emailed Dr. Hale asking whether similarities in conceptual architecture could be defended if 2 contestants had informally developed ideas together. He replied that authorship in student competitions was often more flexible than the rules suggest, and that, if challenged, she should emphasize shared intellectual environment. That phrase made Professor Rook exhale through her nose like a dragon deciding whether a village was worth burning. Shared intellectual environment. It sounded academic enough to hide a theft inside. The panel also found Serena had requested an emergency extension the night before finals, claiming her laptop had corrupted her optimizer files. She withdrew the request at 7:41 the next morning, 27 minutes after copying the decoy folder from my machine. Every timestamp was a nail. Every email was a thread leading back to intent. Serena's advocate tried to argue she had believed I gave implied consent because I had asked her to watch my upload timer. The law faculty chair looked over her glasses and asked, "Does watching a timer ordinarily include copying a project folder and submitting it under your own name?" No one answered. It was the first time in either life that I saw an institution ask the simple question instead of the convenient one. By the end of the hearing, Serena was suspended pending expulsion review. Dr. Hale's certifications were referred to the Academic Integrity Office, and my record was formally marked as complainant and rights holder, not participant in a dispute. That last phrase mattered so much I had to read it twice. Not participant in a dispute. Not one dramatic girl fighting another. Rights holder. For once, the language put me back inside my own life. The public did not become kinder just because the facts were clear. That surprised me, although it should not have. For every message calling me brave, another called me calculating. For every young programmer asking how to protect her work, someone anonymous insisted I had entrapped Serena by leaving the laptop accessible. A podcast host with too much confidence and not enough information asked whether I had weaponized institutional power against another woman in tech. I listened to that clip once while Priya sat beside me eating instant noodles straight from the cup. She paused the video, turned to me, and said, "People love women supporting women until one woman asks another woman not to rob her." I laughed, so suddenly broth nearly came out of her nose. That became our unofficial lab motto, taped to the whiteboard until Professor Rook made us remove it before a sponsor visit. Still, the criticism crawled under my skin some nights. In the first life, I had been condemned because people believed Serena. In the second, I was condemned by people who believed the evidence and still wished I had made the consequences prettier. That is a different kind of loneliness. It taught me that being vindicated does not mean being universally understood. Some spectators do not want truth. They want a version of justice that never makes them question how often they excuse charming people who do ugly things. What helped was work, not because work heals everything, but because useful labor gives pain somewhere to go. The crisis systems lab moved into a larger room with white walls, ugly carpet, and a coffee machine that sounded like it was trying to escape its own body. We held our first proper team meeting on a Thursday afternoon while rain hammered the roof and the city tested its flood sirens outside. I opened the meeting by showing the authorship protocol I had written. Every contribution logged, every major design choice documented, every dataset source recorded, every external demo approved by at least 2 people. Mateo teased that I had created a constitution for a routing algorithm. I told him constitutions exist because people eventually disappoint each other. Professor Rook said, "Put that in the appendix." Underneath the joking, everyone understood. Aster was no longer just code. It was evidence of a culture we were trying to build on purpose. We argued often. Priya thought my hospital priority interface was too sentimental. Mateo thought Priya's design hid too much uncertainty. I thought Mateo's stress tests were sadistic. But every argument happened in the open, attached to tickets, notes, and decisions with names beside them. Slowly, the project taught me that collaboration was not the opposite of protection. It was what protection made possible. Because when credit is clear, people can stop guarding their shadows and start improving the work. The strangest invitation came from my mother. She asked me to come home for dinner, without discussing the contest, which meant she wanted to discuss the contest in a room where she controlled the seating. I went because some part of me still needed to see the house without Serena's version of events hanging in the air. My mother had cooked too much food, the way she did when she wanted guilt to smell like garlic and butter. She fussed over my plate, asked about classes, complimented my suit, then finally put down her fork and said, "Serena made a terrible mistake, but you know public shame can destroy a person." I looked at the framed family photos on the sideboard. In 3 of them, Serena stood closer to my mother than I did. I used to think that was accidental. Private betrayal destroys people too, I said. It just leaves fewer witnesses. My mother's face tightened. You sound hard. Maybe I was. Maybe hardness is what softness becomes after being used as a doormat and then blamed for the footprints. I sound honest, I said. She sighed the disappointed sigh she had practiced for years. Your father would have wanted you to forgive. That was the first time I nearly lost control. My father, who labeled cables and hated lies and once drove across a flooded suburb to help a neighbor move medicine to higher ground. My father, whose death Serena had turned into a stage prop. I placed my napkin beside the plate. Do not use him to make me smaller, I said. My mother stared as if I had slapped her. I stood. Forgiveness is not silence. And family is not a legal defense. I left before dessert. Outside, the evening smelled like wet pavement and jasmine, and for the first time, leaving that house felt less like exile than escape. Near the end of the semester, the contest committee sent me the final evidence archive for my records. It arrived as a locked digital folder with a formal cover letter, the kind of language institutions use when they want to sound human but are afraid of liability. I opened it alone in the lab after everyone had gone home. Inside were the materials that had saved me. Disclosure receipts, repository logs, transfer records, witness statements, Serena's signed forms, Dr. Hale's certifications, the transcript of the live inquiry. I expected satisfaction. Instead, reading it made me shake. Not because the evidence was weak, because it was strong enough that the first life suddenly felt even more unbearable. All of this could have existed then. All of this could have been checked. The truth had not been invisible. It had been inconvenient. I closed the archive and pressed my palms against my eyes until colors sparked behind them. Professor Rook found me that way 20 minutes later because she had forgotten her umbrella. She did not ask if I was all right. That would have been insulting. She sat across from me and said, "The fact that people failed you before does not mean you were foolish for trusting them." I wanted to believe that.
Some days I did.
Some days I still blamed the girl I had been for every door she left unlocked. Professor Rook seemed to hear the thought. A thief is responsible for theft, she said. Not the person who owned something worth stealing. A year after the finals, Meridian invited me back to speak to the new finalists about authorship, collaboration, and project integrity. I almost refused. The auditorium still existed in my body as a place of exposure, even though exposure had saved me there. But Professor Rook said, "Do not let the worst thing that happened in a room decide whether you are allowed back inside it." So I went. The stage looked smaller from the podium than it had from the finalist chairs. The new contestants watched me with the sharp, anxious eyes of people who had not yet learned how easily brilliance can be exploited by anyone willing to call exploitation support. I did not tell them all of my story. I gave them the useful parts. Register your work early. Keep development records. Use written collaboration agreements. Share credit generously, but never vaguely. Do not confuse secrecy with safety or trust with access. If someone makes you feel guilty for protecting your own labor, ask why their comfort requires your vulnerability. They wrote that down. Good. If Rebirth had given me anything beyond vengeance, it was the chance to turn pain into a warning instead of a ghost. After the talk, a girl waited near the stage while everyone else collected sponsor tote bags. She wore an oversized hoodie, chipped black nail polish, and the expression I recognized too well. Brilliant, tired, embarrassed by need. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "My teammate wants me to put his name first because he says investors take men more seriously. He says we both know I wrote the main model, but strategy matters. Is that normal?" There are moments when the past reaches forward, not to haunt you, but to test whether you learned the right lesson. I could have given her a soft answer about communication. Instead, I said, "Normal does not mean acceptable. What does your contribution record show?" Her eyes widened. "I have commits, notebooks, drafts, everything." "Good," I said. "Back them up. Send a summary to your mentor. Put authorship in writing before submission. And if he says you are overreacting, assume he was hoping you would underreact." She nodded slowly, as if someone had given her permission to believe the feeling in her stomach. Maybe that was what I had wanted most in my first life. Not rescue. Permission to stop explaining away the obvious. The girl thanked me and ran after her team. I stood alone for a moment in the aisle where Serena had once whispered that I ruined her, and I felt the room change shape around me. It was no longer the place where a thief fell. It was the place where another girl might not be stolen from at all. The pilot launch happened during a storm because life has a cruel sense of symbolism. 3 counties activated the emergency dashboard after a line of summer rain cells stalled over the river basin and turned small roads into brown water before sunset. We were not in charge. Real emergency coordinators were, and that distinction mattered. We sat in the observation room with laptops open while dispatchers, nurses, supply managers, and transport officers used the system with the impatience of people who had no interest in praising student innovation if it slowed them down. The first alert came from a rural clinic running low on insulin after a delivery truck rerouted too late. Aster suggested a transfer from a larger hospital, Mateo's stress module flagged a bridge risk, and a nurse named Carla rejected the route before the model updated. "That bridge goes under before the official notice every time," she said. Priya looked at me, then added a local override button to the next development list without waiting for permission. 2 hours later, a shipment reached the clinic through a longer road the system would have ranked inefficient without Carla's warning. No cameras were there. No applause followed. No one knew my father's name. But when the confirmation message appeared, something inside me settled more deeply than it had at the contest. This was what Serena had never understood. The work had never been valuable because people clapped for it. It was valuable because somewhere, someone might not be left waiting in the dark because a route on a screen changed in time. That night, walking back across campus under an umbrella that kept turning inside out, I realized I had been waiting for one perfect moment when the old life would finally stop hurting. It did not happen. Healing was less dramatic than exposure. It came as a sequence of ordinary choices, saving my work before leaving a room, trusting a teammate because the agreement was clear, eating dinner without checking whether Serena had posted something new, sleeping through the night without dreaming of a stage where my name disappeared. None of those moments looked like revenge. All of them felt more powerful. People ask in the comments under interviews and in messages they send at 2 in the morning whether I regret letting Serena submit the code. They expect a dramatic answer. They want me to say no because revenge tasted sweet, or yes because mercy would have made me pure. The truth is less useful for slogans. I regret the world that made a trap necessary. I regret every teacher who praised Serena's confidence without checking her work. I regret every relative who taught me that being kind meant being available for use. I regret the version of myself who believed documentation was distrust instead of self-respect. But I do not regret letting Serena sign her own lie. I do not regret letting her stand under lights bright enough to show what she was holding. I do not regret staying silent when she looked to me for mercy she had never planned to offer. Some choices are not about punishment. They are about refusing to interrupt consequences just because the person finally experiencing them looks afraid. The final version of Aster runs now in pilot programs with 3 regional emergency networks. It is still imperfect. Every system is. Sometimes a road closure comes through late. Sometimes a hospital updates capacity in the wrong format. Sometimes the model suggests an efficient route that a local nurse rejects because she knows a bridge floods faster than the map admits. We built a human override for that because the project began with the lesson that systems fail, where people stop being seen. My name is on the patent disclosure, the public interest license, and the first research paper, but it is no longer alone. Priya's name is there. Mateo's name. Professor Rook's. The students who tested the interface. Even the regional coordinators who told us our assumptions were stupid and saved us from elegant mistakes. Credit, I have learned, does not shrink when given honestly. It multiplies. Theft is what makes people fight over scraps. Sometimes late at night, when the lab is empty and the emergency dashboard glows blue in the dark, I think about the other timeline. Maybe somewhere it continues without me. Serena's still on stages, my mother still sending me articles about bitterness, Dr. Hale still calling girls intense when they make him uncomfortable. Maybe that world ended under headlights. Maybe it exists only as scar tissue. I do not know. Rebirth does not come with explanations. It comes with a moment you already survived and asks what you will do differently. I used to think my answer was revenge. Let her steal. Let her submit. Let the contest strip her prize and bar her for life. But that was only the visible part, the part people clipped and shared, the part that made strangers gasp. The real answer was quieter. I kept records.
Idrang no pus una tea.
I let evidence speak before emotion. I stopped protecting someone from the truth just because I loved who she pretended to be. If there is a moral, it is not that every thief will be caught. They will not. It is not that institutions will save you if you follow the rules. Sometimes they arrive too late, and sometimes they protect themselves first. It is not even that revenge heals. Revenge can clear a path, but it cannot teach you how to live on the other side. The moral is this: the work you make with your mind, your grief, your long nights, your private hope, deserves protection before it becomes impressive enough for someone else to want. Protecting it does not make you selfish. Asking for credit does not make you arrogant. Keeping proof does not make you paranoid. And when someone who benefited from your softness calls your boundaries cruel, remember that they are not mourning your cruelty. They are mourning the version of you who made theft easy. So yes, I let Serena take my code. I watched her copy the folder, sign the statement, walk on stage, and speak as if my father's memory belonged to her. I let the server freeze. I let the timeline open. I let the committee ask questions she could have answered truthfully at any moment. I let her choose herself, again and again, until her choices formed a cage no lie could unlock. Then I walked to the same stage, opened my real build, and said my own name into a microphone that finally carried it correctly. The prize she stole was stripped. The title she wanted was erased. The doors she thought my work would open closed in her face for life. And when people later asked how it felt to destroy the girl who had destroyed me, I told them the only answer that was true. I did not destroy her. I submitted my own work. She submitted herself.